I think maybe the news drives us to ask the first question, which is, can you talk a little bit about the decisions and stories that went into the Post's terrific journalism that have led to the resignation of President Trump's National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn?
Well, thank you. Well, look, we have a great national security team at the Post. It's always been one of the great strengths of the Post. We have Greg Miller, Alan Nakashima, Adam Entus now, who have been the sort of the key reporters on that. We have some terrific editors as well. They're doing their job to find out what's going on in this administration, like so much of our team. And they've been working this story for quite a while. Obviously, there's been tremendous interest in the connections between Russia and the Trump administration, very much centered on Michael Flynn all along. He had gone to Russia, he sat next to Putin at one point, and then prior to actually the recent stories, David Ignatius had reported in a column that there were conversations between Flynn and the Russian ambassador to the United States prior to the Trump folks taking office. And so that I think initiated greater interest, and they just kept pursuing that story as far as they could. And there's obviously more to do.
And talk a little bit about, because I was just noting backstage, you have a real crush of stories today about this and the implications. And we're going to talk a little bit about sort of the energy around the Post right now, because it's one of the papers that's really pressing hard along with the New York Times. Mm-hmm. But talk about sort of how you look at covering this. Now, just so you're aware, I started at the Washington Post in the mailroom. It was my
mailroom's never been better.
Yes, thank you. I did a great job. I was very good at delivering mail. So I have huge regard for what you're doing, and I'm thrilled with all the energy that is happening there. And we'll talk about Jeff Bezos in a little bit. But talk a little about how you're looking at this ongoing story and how you're covering it, because your stories have implication and impact, and it's amplified by social media and the internet and people covering it. So talk a little bit about how you're looking at covering this.
Look, I mean, I just look at it as a new administration that we should be covering as aggressively, as energetically as possible. If Hillary Clinton were in the White House, we would be doing the very same thing. Mm-hmm. We want to know who the individuals are, what the policies are, what's the motivation for the policies, what's the impact of the policies, who's influencing those policies. And that's certainly true with the Trump administration, which in the first few weeks of the administration is trying to essentially disrupt the established order and change administration domestic policy and change foreign policy as well, and basically blow up the Washington establishment. So there's a lot to cover, mm-hmm. And we want to be all over that story, and we are all over the story. And covering an administration is absolutely central to the purpose of the Washington Post. We cover a lot of things, but one thing that we absolutely have to cover better than anybody else is who's in the White House, the federal agencies, Congress, the entire government, the politics and the policy.
So Marty, I understand that you'd be covering Hillary Clinton aggressively. I believe that, but I also, know, as you just said, that this is an administration that's trying to disrupt the entire establishment around Washington. As a journalist I've covered Washington a long time, Kara used to also, do you find reporting it harder or easier in this kind of climate in terms of people being willing to talk to you on either off the record or on?
Because the Post was always sort of slightly access-driven. It was sort of it was an insider, even though obviously it's well known for the Watergate and everything else. But when I was there, it was a very insider culture. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I think our journalism has to be less access-driven. Although obviously in this administration, as in many, there are a lot of people who leak, and I think there are a lot of people who are leaking in this administration as well.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
But it's not just that we're passive recipients of leaks. These are people. I mean, we cultivate sources and have cultivated sources over a long period of time. The reporters are going out and doing hard work. I mean, this takes time, mm-hmm. And it's not just a matter of waiting there for somebody to give you leaks. The first story that we had that said that the National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, had substantive discussions about possibly lifting sanctions or suggesting that sanctions would be lifted against Russia prior to the Trump administration taking office. We had 9 sources. We quoted 9, anonymously, attributed it to 9 sources in the intelligence community.
So Is that partly because the people in the intelligence community and presumably in the future people in other parts of the government are fearful of being disrupted or offended or scared or whatever?
Well, I'm not sure I want to get into the motivation of the sources to do anything to indicate who the sources might be. I think that would be inappropriate for me to do. But obviously, people talk to you because they have a motive to speak to you.
Mm-hmm. But talk about that use of sources, because one thing Trump has done today is he's focusing on the leaks and not the actual problem, which seems par for the course. It looks like that's what he tries to do.
And that often happens.
Yeah. Talk about that idea, because a lot of people don't feel like journalists should be using anonymous sources. I get a lot of pushback. I don't care because I know who I'm talking to. But talk about that idea of what it's like to cover an administration like that and what you have to do, because on one hand you have a lot of people who don't trust the press, and we can talk about that in a little bit. And the other, that these are, I'm guessing I'm not guessing who you're talking to, but they're clearly credible people that you have developed sources with. How do you feel about that push-pull in this day and age?
In terms of anonymous sourcing?
Yeah.
Well, look, I think this is a classic case where anonymous sourcing actually has value. We've been saying that, and the press has been saying that for quite a while. I think we have to be very careful about how we use anonymous sources. We have to be clear who is a source. A source should be somebody who has actual direct knowledge of something, and as opposed to somebody who has heard something secondhand, but actually is directly knowledgeable about the information that you're reporting. But obviously on some of the most sensitive subjects, people are not going to go public, and we can't expect them to go public. But we have to make sure that they are legitimate sources, that they know what they're talking about, and when it's a matter of surpassing public interest, we obviously want to rely on them, and that's what we did in this instance.
Can you imagine that in the climate where you have a president who's openly hostile to the press and has essentially declared the press the opposition party,
right,
and the people around him have used that term, can you imagine how fast will it be before you get into the same situation that Kay Graham and her editors were in with Nixon, where it was just like open warfare specifically on the Washington Post?
Well, obviously I don't know. We're only 3 weeks into the administration, but it's been an active.
It's been an active
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Seems like an active 3 weeks. I think it's important to remember, even with the Watergate investigation, that took a long time. Nixon got reelected in the midst of that investigation. And we've had a lot of conflicts over time. The Pentagon Papers case is an example of that. A lot of conflict. The administration actually went to the Supreme Court to prevent additional publication of the Pentagon Papers. So yes, the administration, the president himself has said, I have a running war with the media. That's what he said when he went to the CIA. The way I view it is that we're not at war with the administration. We're at work, okay? We're doing our jobs as the press and what we're expected to do.
So, but it is interesting using the opposition idea of it. Talk about why you think they're doing that. I mean, everyone has thoughts of why they're doing it, and it's interesting to sort of to create in that kind of thing. And I understand there's a populist element and everything else, but how do you look at that when that happens? And do you worry about I can't imagine worrying ever about popularity of the press, and I think most people in the press don't care what people think of them, so it's kind of an interesting thing to attack them on. But talk a little bit about that, about being portrayed, that the public not having trust in the press and things like that.
Right. Well, first of all, I mean, on the issue of opposition party, I mean, first of all, we don't act like a party. I mean, as you know, the press can barely. I mean, we don't coordinate with each other. We just compete with each other. We fight with each other. I missed the meeting. We're certainly not a party. That's for sure. We like a party, but we're not a party. And and as far as being, the opposition, we're not the opposition either. We're independent. And I think we've reached a strange point where just being independent, which the press should be, is portrayed as being opposition. We must be independent. That's, I think, the definition of ethical journalism. And so, why would they do that? Well, first of all, it has served their purposes over the course of the campaign to demonize the press, to try to delegitimize the press. And what has happened over the campaign is not just to try to discredit us and delegitimize us and marginalize us, but actually dehumanize us, to use language that says we're scum, that we're garbage, that we're the, at one point he said we were the lowest form of humanity. That wasn't enough, so he said we were the lowest form of life itself. So I don't know where we go from there, but that's apparently where we are. So
bacteria work cheap in the
but I think, so during a campaign, look, since our popularity ratings are not high, it served their purposes. It appealed to their base. But now that they're in office, obviously it serves their purpose in another way, and that is to portray us as not being independent, not being an independent check on them, but actually just being a political opposition. And in that way, to sort of neutralize themselves and immunize themselves from actual real reporting.
So talk about that because, Kellyanne Conway's sort of, for some reason, has become something. I don't understand why the focus on her. But she goes on these programs, and lately it's fascinating to watch George Stephanopoulos be super aggressive. I'm thrilled. And Matt Lauer all of a sudden is like an attack dog, which is welcome. I was like, what? Yeah. I just leaned in this morning. But I'm glad. I'm thrilled that they're doing that. Talk about that, like when you have them doing alternative facts, fake news, all this stuff. And then I want to get into the Wall Street Journal's Jerry Baker, one of your close friends. Yeah, I don't think so. About that idea, because he just gave a speech calling that they're sort of more neutral fake news, for example. So
I'm sorry, so the question is
The question is, let's start with the idea of putting out alternative facts, fake news.
Yeah, well, look, I think, first of all, we have to understand that the alternative to facts is not alternative facts. Mm-hmm. It's fiction,
right.
Okay? So, so I think, I think this is a really concerning development that we seem to think that there is no such thing as objective fact, that it's all just a matter of personal opinion. And there's a consistent effort, not just within this administration, but in other venues as well, to try to make it appear that there is no real objective fact, that it is all opinion, and that nothing can really be believed. There was a Trump surrogate who said in the campaign that there's no such thing anymore, unfortunately, as facts. Mm-hmm. Well, my view is that there is such a thing as facts, and the press's job is to tell you what they are, and that is. And it's concerning that we might have a society where people just feel like who knows what to believe, so you're allowed to believe whatever you'd like to believe, whatever you feel is right.
Do you think that genie is out of the bottle? Because I literally had a relative, there was a story about Hillary Clinton being a lizard person, and I said
You didn't believe that?
I didn't, it was big, I don't. It was on, I've tried to scratch her face.
But you have several relatives like that.
Yes, exactly. And they were like, I was like this, I was complaining to Facebook about it because it was huge on Facebook. And it was about her being a lizard. And one of my relatives I said, this is just not true. She's not a lizard. She may not like her, but she's not a lizard. This is a conversation.
Did she believe you?
And no, it's a guy, of course. And literally he goes, well, that's your opinion, Kara. And I'm like, what? Like, she's not a lizard. And it was like, I can't believe I was in this conversation.
Right. Well, look, there was that very disturbing incident at Comet Ping Pong in Washington, which is a pizza place, and this whole suggestion that the Clinton emails, that there was sort of a subtext there that suggested that there was a sex ring occurring in the basement, and some guy came up from North Carolina, brought a gun, fired a few times, fortunately did not hit anybody, and how people believe such things is
They can't even make very good pizza at that place.
They don't? I haven't been there.
Oh, so. Yeah. So let me ask you about...
That may be true. I don't know.
So what do you think about...
I want to, before we get to Baker, I want to ask you about this language that is a subject of debate in journalism. So the New York Times has printed the word lie with regard to things that Trump has said on a few occasions. Jerry Baker, I guess it does get to Baker, at the Wall Street Journal has made a big deal about how you can't call it a lie because lies involve knowing people's inner intentions, and you can't know that. Where do you stand on that? I read the Post every day.
Right.
And
and I know that
have called things
I know
false.
that Kara's brought this up before. So
I have. I had a big argument with Cameron about it.
I know. Maybe we're headed for an argument here. Yeah. But look, I think we should call things false when we know that they're false, and we have called things absolutely false, and we say that in headlines.
Falsehood is your favorite word.
Falsehood, things like that. Lie does suggest that you know that the person knew that it was false at the time that he or she said it, and then said it anyway. And if we have evidence of that, then we would use that term. Absent evidence of that,
You've never had, but I don't think you have used that term, have you?
we have not. We have not yet used that term. No.
And is that because you've never encountered a case where you?
Not yet. Not yet. So where we know that that he knew what he said was false when he said it. There can be all sorts of reasons.
Why are you giving someone the benefit of the doubt in that way? Because then how would you know they knew it was a lie when it's so obviously a lie?
If he was presented with a report and then we knew that he was presented with a report and then went out and said something different, there are any number of ways that people could have evidence that he lied. But we would use that term. We would reserve that term for the time that we could actually.
What do you think of the Times doing that? Which I agree with, obviously.
Apparently. So.
I agree with
Look,
you.
I mean, I think I'm being double teamed.
The entire room
so-
agrees with us, but go ahead.
Okay.
No, I don't know.
Look, I don't make a judgment on the Times. So I think they make their own judgments. They haven't used it repeatedly, by
Twice,
the way.
right.
So they've used it pretty sparingly. So, and I think if you're going to use it, I mean, you do want to use it when you feel that it's really justified by the
Right.
facts. And look, we all exercise our own judgment on
Right,
these sorts of
right.
things. At the moment, I think to say something is simply not true is what has been appropriate.
But you're not aligning yourself with Baker. This is Jerry Baker, who's got the similar position to Marty at the Wall Street Journal, who has basically said he's never going to use that word.
He said he's never going to use that
Wait,
word.
yeah.
I would never say that we're never going to use that word.
I'm
If
putting
we can-
words.
if we-
I'm paraphrasing, but that's what I.
If we can document that he stated a falsehood and that he knew it was false at the time that he said it, we would use that word.
Okay.
All right, but I'm not going to ask you where you stand on the word fib, but
The word fib?
fib. Yeah.
I
There's a lot of
haven't used
fibbing
that word in a very long
Yeah,
time.
there's a whole lot of it going on. When you think about, talk about the journal, because you've been in quite a few kerfuffles with him.
Not quite a few.
Another great word. by
Not
the way.
quite a few.
Well, enough, more than one, two, whatever, I don't care. That was a fib. You have staked out a position, he just yesterday had a meeting with his reporters talking about use of the word Muslim, majority Muslim
right.
countries. And then he used a term which I was hugely offended by, but I'm easily offended by Jerry Baker, which was that it's fake news, that they're not being fair.
That anyone who criticizes them for being soft on Trump is peddling fake news.
Yeah, what did you
Which
think
is
of
a
that?
direct Trumpian kind of comment.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Look, I'm not going to, he's made some statements about the rest of the media. I'm not interested in making statements about the Wall Street Journal. I have tremendous respect for a lot of the journalists at the Wall Street Journal who are fantastic. And I know quite a few of them. We've hired people from there. I have great admiration for a lot of the work that they do. And I have no interest in getting into a fight with them.
But I don't want you to get in a fight with them, but how, when you're an editor of a paper, do you have to, is there a place of fair anymore? Because given all the things that are going on.
Look, I mean, I think, what's our job? I mean, our job is to go out and get the facts, okay? That's our job. Go out and get the facts, find out what they are, determine where those facts lead us, and then tell people
That's part of
in
your
a
job.
straightforward.
You also have columns.
We do, but I mean, it's
Opinions.
fundamentally, let's start at a base level, to get the facts, add them all up, see what they add up to, and then tell people what we have found, and I believe, tell it to them in a straightforward, direct, unflinching way, and not to mask it in any way, not to masquerade it, not to water it down in any way, but to tell people what we've really found. And that's what I think we ought to be doing. We should go about our work in an honest, honorable, and fair way, but I think we also need to think about what fairness means, and fairness also means being fair to the public. And that means telling them what we really found and not pretending that we found something less than that.
All right, let's talk about your ongoing future ability to do that. So, obviously, newspapers have been hugely disrupted, and even online to some extent. To get those facts out to as many people as possible, is it necessary to have digital paywalls? Is that just an absolute necessity?
I think it's helpful for our economic model, for sure. And I think in order for us to sustain what we're doing journalistically, we need to earn as much revenue as possible. And we find that it's working for us. Our subscriptions are growing at a very rapid rate right now. It was doing that during the election, doing that after the election, and we're very pleased with that, and it's becoming a very significant source of revenue for us. And that revenue is necessary in order to sustain our journalism.
Doesn't it put an economic barrier between your ability to promulgate those true facts that you find out and some members of the public being able to consume them? And instead of going to you, where you're doing this kind of gutsy reporting with facts, they'll believe their only source will be somebody else.
Well, look, I mean, we had over 100 million unique visitors coming to our digital platform, all of our digital platforms in the latter part of last year, and that's a lot of people. And we're able to reach a lot of people, and we could go higher than that, even with a paywall. We give people access to 5 free articles a month, and then they share it with other people. So I don't think that we're preventing people from getting the information that we publish. And on top of that, when we do stories like the Flynn story, other people follow it, and it circulates to additional people that way.
So talking about the importance, you obviously have a pretty famous owner now, Jeff Bezos. Talk about that experience. You started with the Grahams, who I work for. He sold it to Jeff Bezos. How has that experience been? And what did you expect at the beginning?
Well, it's been a great experience. I mean, look, when
right at the beginning, do you go, oh, Jesus, this guy, or what?
Well, you know, I've told this to Jeff myself. I don't think I said it that way, but I think as I told Jeff, and this is true, I said that I thought that it would be good for the Post. I did not know whether it would be good for me, because obviously you have a new owner, he might want a new editor. It's not inconceivable, it's happened before. So, but I thought that it would be good for the Post because I thought that our industry and the Washington Post needed new ideas. He was somebody who was able to bring, obviously, first of all, a sense of growth. He was going to want to grow. He's not known as a person who just wants to shrink, so that was positive. Also, he's a person who brought a deep knowledge of technology. That was going to be really helpful to the Post. And even beyond that, he brought a real understanding of consumer behavior, which a lot of people haven't focused on, and I think that's incredibly helpful to us since we're a consumer-facing business. And so I thought all of those would be really helpful. And our industry had been deprived, I think, of a lot of new thinking. Everybody was thinking about the same things, going about it the same way. Nothing was really working. And I thought it was really important that we have somebody who came in with a fresh perspective. And I was confident that Jeff was going to be able to bring that to the Post. And I was just hopeful that I would be there to experience that and ideally to contribute to that.
So since you are still there, can you give us a couple of concrete examples where Jeff being the owner, with all those qualities you mentioned, has made a difference?
Sure. I mean, I think, look, the first thing...
Beyond just a good source of funding, which is important, but...
Yeah, right. I mean, I saw somebody use the word benefactor. He's not a benefactor for us. I mean, we're not treated as a charity. We're a business. He wants us to be a business. The whole idea is to create a sustainable business model for the Washington Post.
So give us a couple
and we should be grateful for that because if someday he decides that he doesn't want to own the Washington Post anymore, it would be good for us to have a sustainable business model and not be his charity.
Right.
So he's not creating a charity for us. Look, when he first came in, he immediately changed the strategy for the Post. We had been a news organization that was focused on, as they put it at the time, for and about Washington. Certainly a recognition that that was the center of government, but focused primarily on the Washington metro.
Very local, yeah.
So DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And that's what we were doing, and we were shrinking in order to fit that strategy. When he came in, he said he didn't think that that was the appropriate strategy. He was quite honest and forthright about that, and he said that he thought that we needed to be national. And one of the points that he made is, look, the internet has taken a lot away from this industry. Fundamentally, it took away the security that we had in this industry, where you used to have to have presses and trucks and ink and paper and all that stuff to get into the business, high barriers to entry. So, and obviously, it undermined the advertising model for the industry, and to a large extent, the readership model for the industry as well. And so we suffered a lot because of the internet. Why not take advantage of the gifts that the internet has to offer? And the most important gift that or fundamental gift that the internet has to offer is free distribution. And so here we had the capacity to distribute to everybody around the country and even around the world at virtually no cost. And by the way, we also happen to have a brand that was pretty well known. When people talk about the United States, they'd say Washington as a synonym, essentially, for the United States. And so we were one of the few media brands that had the opportunity, a few newspaper brands that had the opportunity to be national in scope in the digital and international in scope in the digital age. So that was one thing he did. And also talking about, okay, well, what does that mean? We moved more heavily into the world of aggregation. Some of these were our ideas. I mean, he asked for our ideas, and we gave him our ideas. Some of them were his ideas. So we moved more heavily into the world of aggregation, which he encouraged us to do, and we did. We created an overnight crew that produces something called Morning Mix. They work in the enviable hours of 10 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning, scanning the world of the internet, look at what's gaining traction, what stories have we not reported, our own staff hasn't reported, and trying to jump on those stories, do their own reporting, use some aggregation, but also add their own style of writing, which was great. We created this model where we offered free access to the Washington Post to newspapers around the country to their subscribers, that their subscribers could actually have free access to the Washington Post. It was added value for those newspapers. It's not a major source of traffic for us, but it was a way of getting our name out around the country in a way that we had not done to date. We created a lot of, we learned from people who went over to Vox Media, who started Vox.com. So Ezra Klein had been at the Post and was the founder of Wonk Blog. And you could see that was producing a significant amount of traffic. And so, well, why wouldn't we replicate that? We added to Wonk Blog. We created all sorts of other blogs that were going to be appealing to a national audience, where the writers were going to be sensitive to what their traffic numbers were. They were going to be paying a lot of attention to their audience. All of that, we did that. You know, one of the questions at the Post was, look, Huffington Post was created overnight. Why didn't we do that? There was a lot of sort of self-reflection about that, and you know, we should have done that. And the answer to that was, well, okay, so let's do it. What's the big deal here? And we created something called Post Everything, which is a venue for people who are not on staff, not regular op-ed columnists, traditional op-ed columnists, who write in the moment. A lot of personal memoir type things, people talking about their own experiences. We go out and actively solicit people to write for it and to write quickly. We help them with the writing as well. But we see, you know, great ideas out there. So there are a whole range of things that we have done. We've paid a lot more attention to social media, how our work is distributed. We have a very large audience engagement team. Not just paying attention to Facebook and Twitter and all of that, and to Google, but to paying attention to all sorts of other social media outlets that can be advantageous to us.
How often do you talk to him?
We have a conference call with him once every 2 weeks, where we talk about tactics and strategy. I don't talk to him at all about our coverage. He never interferes in our coverage, doesn't suggest stories or anything like that. He's proud of the work that we've done. He's been very supportive. He's said that. It's been great. It's been wonderful for the people on the staff. But he focuses on strategy and tactics, and that's the discussion that we have once every 2 weeks. And then periodically we see him. He comes to Washington.
You sound, and we're going to get to questions next, you sound super geeky right now, by the way. That was a whole geeky.
Well.
What do you think, the last question I ask is, what do you think a modern journalist has to be now? What is your ideal, if you could create a journalist, what do they have to be?
Well, you know, I mean, I think that, first of all, they have to be good at all the fundamentals. They have to be a great journalist. They have to know how to report, know how to write. They have to be good with the language, all of that. But they also have to understand all the new tools that we have and the ways that we tell stories, which is completely different. The internet is a different medium. We have to recognize that, different from print, different from radio, different from television. And actually, as has been pointed out to me, it's not just a medium, it's mediums that we're operating in right now. Mobile is a different medium. We just started publishing on Snapchat, and that's a different medium. The podcasts that we do, what we do on Amazon's Echo and devices like that, that's a different medium. So we're operating in so many different mediums right now. And so I think people have to recognize that. And then also, I think it's really important that journalists be entrepreneurs. Now, this would have been antithetical to our profession in a previous era, but I think that we have to be, ideas are really important. Ideas are really important just to being a good journalist, like what stories you're going to be pursuing, but also we need to have ideas about how we can get our work to more people, how we can make our work more attractive, how we can work successfully in this environment. So people who enter this profession today are going to have to be entrepreneurs, either working for independent entrepreneurial companies or being entrepreneurs within companies.
We know something about that.
The word is reporterpreneur, which is the worst word ever.
Reporterpreneur? That's a bad word. We shouldn't use that
I know,
again.
but that's the word.
Very bad word.
Reporterpreneur. Try it. Keep practicing it. Go ahead.
Let's do questions.
Hi, I'm Jason Rapp. First of all, God, is it so refreshing to hear a serious person taking their job seriously. So thank you for that. I guess digging into the Baker discussion, the context there is ownership. And Baker's owner, Rupert Murdoch, his politics are quite clear. Your counterpart at the New York Times has been at least following a dictate since 1896 to deliver the news without fear or favor. And you just said that Bezos never talks to you about the news. So what is that mandate to you, and are you creating it, or where do you think he stands in what the journalistic mission or that kind of touchstone is for the journalism at the Post?
Sure. I didn't say he never talks to us about the news. He doesn't give us any instructions about how to cover the news. So obviously he reads what we do and praises the work that he's seen. He's talked quite eloquently about sort of growing up in the era of Watergate and watching the Watergate hearings and how much that affected him at the time. And he does believe very strongly about, as he puts it, shining light in dark corners. He does believe that the role of the press is to hold government accountable and other powerful individuals accountable. And so that's what he wants us to do. He takes pride in that. That has been absolutely core to the mission of the Washington Post for a long time, not just Watergate, but since Watergate and even before Watergate. That's been core to the Washington Post. And I was just reading this the other day on the plane because I'm reading this history of the Pentagon Papers. And it mentioned the Articles of Incorporation of the Washington Post. And in the Articles of Incorporation of the Washington Post, it talks about us being an independent newspaper, independent. And that's what we, working on behalf of our community and the principles of a free press. That's what we were when we were incorporated, and that's what we are today.
Felix?
Yeah.
So there are two different views of the way that the media should engage the Trump administration. One is that he is attacking the media, as you've said, in unprecedented kind of ways, that he is qualitatively different from any president who's come before him, and that that oppositional stance that is his doing is necessarily going to create a kind of need on the behalf of the media to be much more explicitly oppositional. The other view, which is what you've said and what Jerry Baker has said too, is basically our job hasn't changed. Our job is to find the facts, to report them, to be tough when we find something, newsworthy to report, and basically nothing has changed. So the question which I have for you is that if you're saying that, and Jerry Baker is saying that, and honestly there's nothing which you said on stage today which Jerry Baker hasn't also said, what's the difference between you and him? How can we tell the difference between what you're doing and what, basically this kind of almost Trumpish mouthpiece is saying?
Well, look, I don't know. I think that's for readers to judge. And I think you just judge. I don't see us as the opposition party to the administration, and I don't see myself as the opposition party to the Wall Street Journal either, by the way. We're competitors, and I think that they do great work. I think that readers can judge what they see. our work is out there for everybody to see, for everybody to critique and to assess in any way they want to. I'm proud of the work that we've done. We want to continue on that path. I don't know that it's unprecedented. If you go back and read the history of the Nixon administration, it was incredibly hostile and aggressive toward the press. Go look at what his vice president, Spiro Agnew, before he had to leave office, what he said at the time about the press. Nattering nabobs of negativism was just was the mildest, one of the more mild comments.
By the way, he had to leave office because the Wall Street Journal got that scoop.
Right. So. Look, I mean, I think that our job is to, was originally conceived. Why was the First Amendment created in the first place? And that is that we were to be an independent check on government and politicians and policymakers. That's what we are. That's what we have been. That's what we are. That's what we will be.
Can we get the house lights up, by the way?
Felix, he's not going to say it. I think the Journal's done some great work, but I think Jerry Baker's a suck up. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm just curious what your thoughts were about BuzzFeed's publishing of the Trump intelligence dossier and how that moved the conversation forward. When you have something that is being talked about or being discussed in the highest reaches of government, insiders know about it. Do you think that the public should know about it, even if you can't independently verify it? And
it was given to the president.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Look, different media organizations came to different judgments. We came to a different judgment from BuzzFeed, and I stand by the judgment that we made. And that is that, we think that there's a base level of verification that has to take place before you publish things. We get a lot of things, and particularly during campaigns where there's opposition research and information being passed around, it circulates all over the place. I don't think that we should just put out there for everybody to see every single thing that passes across our desks. We, I think, have an obligation to do what I talked about earlier, and that is go through the process of verification. At the very least, we needed to verify something in that report. We hadn't really verified anything in that report. And I don't think that just putting up that report and saying it's around and here it is, it was the right thing to do. And by the way, BuzzFeed didn't do that until CNN did its report. So somehow it didn't feel that it should do that prior to the CNN report. Once the CNN report came out, then it said, okay, here's the entire report.
And that President Trump got to see it wasn't enough of a news hook for you?
You got to see a summary.
Summary of it, yeah.
Look, this was a piece of work that was done as opposition research, and I think that there were serious allegations made in that report, and we have an absolute obligation to try to verify that information before just putting it out there for people to talk about.
That would be a tough verification.
I believe that verification is at the core of our mission.
That's a very good point.
I just want to say I'm a new subscriber to the Post, and just thank you for your work. So,
thank you.
Curious about something very specific, which is the way David Fahrenthold went about reporting his story on the charities, which lasted a long time, and he was in a reasonably unprecedented, although please correct me if I'm wrong, a reasonably unprecedented way. He kept posting consistent updates on Twitter and other places, soliciting feedback and kind of engaging his audience. And I thought of that as kind of a reasonably novel way of doing reporting, and kind of very much leverages the strengths of today's universe. First of all, is that something that he just kind of did on his own, or is that something you discussed internally? And then secondly, are you guys thinking about that type of reporting as something on a go-forward basis that we'll see more of from, not just from David, but from other reporters at the Post and elsewhere?
He's a perfect journalist.
Well, I think that's a great example, and I'm glad you brought it up. He did it on his own, and I'm kind of glad we didn't discuss it, because God knows we might have come to a different conclusion. It's very unusual, because most people who are engaged in investigative reporting, they're very secretive. They keep everything. They don't even want their colleagues to know what they're working on. And when I was at the Boston Globe, the Spotlight team was on a different floor in a different place. You could barely find them.
We enjoyed that movie.
Good. Okay. And so, so this was very unusual, but it was very effective. And it was a novel technique to sort of say, okay, look, I'm trying to find anybody out there who has received money directly from Donald Trump's own pocket. Please let me know. How could he possibly know without going out to the public that he had reached every conceivable possible recipient? And so he went out, and then he said, okay, he put his actual paper notes, he'd take pictures of them. It was kind of a blend of old media and new media, his handwritten notes, and say, here are all the ones that I've spoken to. Anybody have anything else? And people would mention something, and then he would go check them out. And it also, when he was looking for the paintings of Donald Trump that had been acquired with his foundation's funds, we didn't know where they were. And so he put out a call to find it. And one woman just went on to TripAdvisor on all the Trump properties and started looking at all the photos. I mean, people, they just took it upon themselves. They went through and looked at every photo from every Trump property that she could find, hundreds of photos, and lo and behold, stumbled across a picture of the painting, of one of the paintings, and then reported it to him. And he put that up and said, oh, she found this. She found it at the Doral Country Club in Miami. And then, but he didn't know if it was still there. One of the anchors for Univision, Enrique Acevedo, went down, checked himself into the hotel, using points, as he pointed out, and then, obviously, as a Spanish speaker, he just talked to the workers there at the hotel about where's the painting of Donald Trump, and they pointed it to him. He took a picture and sent it back to David, and we published it. So he enlisted the help of the public. I think it is new.
Yeah.
And are we trying to use that? Yes. We announced that we're creating a so-called rapid response investigative team on top of the investigative team that we have traditionally had. They've done great work, but the work tends to take sort of a longer period of time. And this is to turn things around more quickly, and also to use techniques like that. It doesn't have to be exactly like that, but there may be more innovative techniques that are available to us in a digital era that traditional investigative reporters are not aware of or not inclined to use. And so we're hopeful that this particular team will try to find those new techniques, use them, and then produce great journalism just as David did.
Cool. We have time for one quick question. Sorry, everybody else, we're just out of time, but go ahead.
Sure, this one's fairly quick. So it seems in very short order, Trump and the administration have embraced using the term fake news to call things they don't like, whether it's fake or not.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, we have the stories that are fake news, like Kara's story about Hillary Clinton being a lizard or Pizzagate. And then on the other hand, you have what I would consider more to be propaganda, where they're pushing voters, voter fraud to eventually probably launch a voter suppression type of initiative. How do you balance coveraging these two types of stories so that they don't all just get subsumed into this loud noise of fake news that isn't necessarily fake? And then how do you focus on something that's propaganda being pushed for political purposes and fake news that's just fake?
Yeah, well, like the lizard thing, we're not that terribly concerned about it. So we're not going to be reporting resources on that one. So, but when the president goes and says that there are 3 to 5 million people who illegally voted for his opponent, that's a serious matter, right? And I think it's a serious matter that a president would say something like that and not produce any evidence of it, or to say that people were bussed up from Massachusetts to go vote in New Hampshire, and there is no evidence of that. Anyone has an obligation to produce evidence when they make a serious allegation, especially the President of the United States, when he says that there is massive voter fraud and that he's going to initiate an investigation of voter fraud. Before any investigation takes place, you would expect that there would be actual evidence of significant voter fraud, and there is none. And that we take very seriously, and we write about how that's false, that's absolutely false information, that there's no evidence of that. We've written about that extensively. I mean, look, we're in a weird time now because one of the people out there is this radio host and internet a guy who puts out Infowars.com, who he has actually alleged in the past that some of the mass shootings that have been reported, that those are hoaxes. All right, that the mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, where all these kids were killed and adults were killed, that was synthetic, that there were actors used, things like that. Turns out that Donald Trump gave him an interview during the campaign, said that his reputation was amazing. it is amazing, but not quite in the way, not quite in the way that was intended. And so his reputation is amazing, and CNN is fake news. Now, this is sort of head spinning, right? So CNN is not fake news, and this guy's reputation is not amazing in the way that the president's comments were intended.
Anyway, head spinning. Very
Thank
good
you,
way to end it.
Marty.
Thank you, Marty Baron.
Thank you.
Thank you.